This panel is more about the environment in which we all are living, and about new reality that we face too. And we are going to talk more about the role of non-Western countries in solving a crisis. By the way, we had a small discussion with my colleague Maria Tomak, the head of the Crimean Platform Office. Should we put the word crisis into the title of this panel discussion or not? And we decided to put. And maybe my question to our distinguished panelists will be, do you see this crisis within the international order? And we are going, within this panel, we're going in a little bit different way than previous. And we'll start with our Ukrainian speaker, and I'll switch to Ukrainian. Ми почнемо цю презентацію.
So this presentation will start with the opening remarks of the General Dmytro Usov, who's the Secretary to Coordination Headquarters on the prisoners of war, because he will have to excuse himself soon enough to go on another important meeting. But we thank you, General, for sharing your time for the benefit of participating in this panel discussion today. Could you kindly provide us with a brief overview of the Ukrainian efforts to resolve this humanitarian crisis that Ukraine faces when it comes to prisoners of war, recovering the prisoners of war, and also the same regarding the imprisoned children, civilians as well as servicemen? So what are expectations of Ukraine in that context, and what can the non-Western countries do? Thank you so much, dear Olga, and thank you, our esteemed guest. Thank you for being so brave, for staying here despite the sirens and alerts. This is very important to see what, where, and how international countries and organizations can do for the benefit of Ukraine in this respect. First and foremost, Ukraine, when it comes to abiding by and fully implementing and enforcing international laws, has done everything that was possible and beyond, starting with 2014 and definitely at the time of full-scale aggression, where such steps and actions are also, including those related to international law, are fully implemented in every aspect of our life. Since the initial days, we made substantial efforts to develop and endorse not only respective legislations and standards, but also institute organizations with respective mandate and functions. When it comes to return of our prisoners of war, both civilians and servicemen, this would be establishment of the operational headquarters in affairs of the prisoners of war. These headquarters are chaired by the General Budanov, while myself, as the secretary of this coordination center, and we are involved in addressing different areas of performance and questions about performance of our center. I believe you can find more detailed information about our coordination center in the printout materials, which are available for the benefit of the delegates and participants, to describe our functions and jurisdiction, mandatory authorities of the different public agencies involved. Okay, please confirm that you can hear me clear enough, or do we have any technical issues? So, despite those technical issues, let me continue to emphasize that Ukraine is fully compliant with the norms of international law. Ukraine abides by the fundamental principles and values whereby human life is the ultimate value. And we understand and respect that in regard to our citizens as well as our enemies, or rather, I should use singular for the enemy which attacked us. And thus, when it comes to implementation of the international rules and regulations, that also involves establishment of the respective camps. Today we have 5 of those, as well as treatment of such prisoners. And looking to the reports of international organizations monitoring the situation, begging your pardon, but we have a ballistic missile alert, which means that we have to proceed to a safe shelter immediately. Our apologies for such inconveniences. This is not our fault. This is the Russians. Please follow our volunteers and assistants to the safe shelter, and please proceed there immediately.
Dear guests, we are about to restart our panel discussion. Please come here, come closer, because we are going to have very, very insightful discussion about the international order, about the role of international organizations in solving the humanitarian crisis. I'd like to ask if Mr. Ambassador is with us, or no, he isn't. Could you ask him? Можете, будь ласка, попросити його під...
Could you please ask Mr. Ambassador to connect?
My name is Olha Reshetylova. I'm the head of the Media Initiative for Human Rights. And now we are going to have a panel discussion titled Overcoming the Crisis, the Role of Non-Western Countries in Restoring the Effectiveness of International Organizations and their Humanitarian Mission. As you remember, previously we had with us General Dmytro Usov, who is the Secretary of the Coordinational Headquarters. And he's at another meeting, but he's going to be back to our panel discussion. But we will start from our distinguished guests from different countries and different parts. And do we have Mr. Beltrán with us? No? Okay, so I want to introduce you Umashankar Singh. He's from India, senior editor of political and foreign affairs at NDTV. Is it right? Yes. You're very welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Also, I want to introduce you Marina Slhessarenko Barreto. as I knew already, Marina had someone of her grandparents was Ukrainian, so she's a little bit Ukrainian. Marina is a researcher with the Law and Democracy Cluster at the Brazilian Center for Analysis and Planning. She is also a freelance political analyst and, as I understand, lives for 2 countries, Brazil and Germany. Welcome, Marina. As I mentioned, we are going to have again with us Dmytro Usov, who is Secretary of the Coordinational Headquarters for the Treatment of Prisoners of War from Ukraine. And also online, we're supposed to have Ambassador Rubén Beltrán, lawyer and career diplomat, former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mexico, and Ambassador of Mexico to Russia and Chile. He will join us online. Okay, I think we can start. This won't be in order we planned, but we will start maybe from India, from you, Umashankar. And my question to you will be, if you see this crisis we're talking about, if you see the crisis of the international organizations, and how do you see the role of India in this regard? And we know that recently Prime Minister Modi went to Ukraine, and during this visit you were able to ask President Zelensky about the role of India and how he sees this role. And Volodymyr Zelensky answered that he wanted India to be on Ukraine's side. What do you think? Is it possible for India to be on Ukraine's side? And how do you see the role of India in solving the humanitarian issues? Please.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to mention that I'm fortunate that I'm here in Kyiv for the third time. I came to cover Prime Minister Modi visit also, and as you mentioned that I also got a chance to ask question to President Zelensky. I will come on that, but first of all, I would like to say you that I came in April 2022 to cover the war, and that time I went to Mykolaiv, I stayed one night in Odessa, went to Chernihiv, Berdyanka, Irpin, Marianka, and Bucha. I covered almost all the devastated part of the country except Sumy. That side I couldn't go. So I have a fair sense, fair idea what this country is going through. And when it comes to India's role, as you rightly mentioned, Prime Minister Modi came here, and that was a visit after 29 years of 31 years of diplomatic relation. So that showed the India's willingness to be a peacemaker and try to make some kind of, arrangement to have a peace process at least started. And because India is having a good influence over Russia also, India is contributing in Russia's economy by buying oil, and I know that a lot of Western countries, they are not happy with that, but even Western countries are getting energy from Russia, even through India. When India refines the oil, then even many Western countries getting that oil, because that's the need of the time. You cannot live without energy. Even now here, the cold season has started, and everyone needs a lot of energy for that. So my point is that who can become a peacemaker? A party cannot become a peacemaker. So when you talk about that, can India come to Ukrainian side, I think that is not the right way to see the thing. India should neither be the Ukraine side nor should be the Russian side. Okay, and that's what India is playing the role right now. There are many countries who came with some idea or some formula, like China came up with the 12-point formula. Ukraine is having all 10 points formula for peace or to stop the war. For that matter, many countries came with the formula. But what is positive aspect with India is that India hasn't spelled out any 10 or 12 or 14 or 15 points formula. India is trying to negotiate with Ukraine, with Russia as well, and trying to make out a kind of arrangement so that both the parties, both the fighting party can be agreed upon. So that is the right approach to this situation. That as a journalist, at least I think that. So becoming the side of Ukraine, because you have a lot of countries who are helping you militarily, humanitarian ground, everyone is helping you out. If you talk about the Western countries, they are helping you out with the military aid like anything. America is helping you out with the military aid like anything, but that is not giving you any solution. So any war has to come to the conclusion, and for that you have to be on the negotiating table. So India is trying to play a role, neither this side nor that side, being a neutral party, and India has showed its intention that our Prime Minister Modi went to Ukraine. First he went to Russia, then he came to Ukraine, again he went to Russia for the BRICS. And this process will take, I think, a longer period of time. It's not about that I will come and I will stop the war in 24 hours' time. That is not going to happen. I'm very sorry to say that this war cannot be stopped overnight. So it will take a longer period of time, because this problem has come to this edge after the decades of dispute. So there is no one-night solution, and I think that India can play my last point is that India can play a very vital role in the humanitarian assistance also. I was researching, I got to know that out of 10 people, 4 Ukrainians need any kind of, one kind or other kind of humanitarian aid. So almost 40% of Ukrainian population needs aid and for that matter, India can be a very helpful partner, and side by side, it can also pursue its effort to negotiate peace.
Thank you very much. I'll be back to you, and I want to ask Marina about, you know, a lot of Ukrainians have this impression that Brazilian society is very supportive to Ukrainians. But when it comes to the governmental foreign policy, it's like a little bit different from what we usually hear from Brazilians. How do you think, should the social influence to the policy change the foreign policy for the view of your president? And what is the Brazilian role in the reforming of the international order, let's say?
Hey, Olga, thank you for the question. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. So thank you, Crimea Platform, for organizing this event. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Brazilian colleagues and friends and embassy representatives, authorities. If I may have the audacity to start saying this, I think this is a very revolutionary forum to be, and I know humanity has failed a lot of times in revolutions. You know it better than I do. But I think we're talking about a very democratic, radically democratic revolution, and that's very special. It's my second time here in Ukraine. As you said, my family comes from Ukraine, so it's a double pleasure to be here because it's also something personal. I take it very personally as well. And from the first time I came, what I saw in Ukrainian society that I didn't know how deep it was, is that you have a very engaged civil society. That's fantastic, and very different democratic innovations, gender parity initiatives, and a lot of other traits that are not common in other parts of the world. So that's why I say this is a hub for a democratic revolution, and I'm very thankful to be here and to talk to you. Thank you. About your question, you're right, unfortunately, you're right to say that in Brazil, civil society is friendly to Ukrainian causes, but the government has been erratic. And I think that to understand all this issue, we have to take a step back, actually, and understand the history of Brazil. So Brazil, for us, it's even difficult to conceive what is a country amid war. We didn't have a lot of war. I mean, every formation of state is a violent act, but wars are something very from the past for us. If you take a random Brazilian in the street and ask him what's the last war that he knows that happened in the country, I'm pretty sure he would say, I don't know, or something from the 19th century. So I think this kind of gives us the context of how different our reality is from what we're seeing nowadays in Ukraine. So, and for the civil society to take a friendly stand on this issue is something remarkable, because what we see is that it's a very different reality from what we experience in our country, and but it's not unified. It's not something that we see across a lot of segments in the society. I was talking to other Brazilian colleagues here that are also experts on foreign policy. And what we're saying is that we have not great awareness of foreign policy in Brazil. Because Brazil, first of all, Brazil is a very, we say it's a continental country. It's very great, it's very big. So, and we have a lot of issues, internal issues, as every other country in the world. And that's why we don't have a unified stance on civil society. But we see hubs journalistic hubs, civil society hubs, initiatives that take action, hands-on actions, to say that they are not abiding by Russian propaganda rules, because we know that in Latin America, unfortunately, as it may seem, there are very capillary networks of Russian propaganda. And if we take the stand of the civil society, there are friendly stances, but they are not unified. Normally, if you go to universities or some journalistic hubs and expert hubs, you find friendly stances. But when we're talking about the government and institutional politics, that's really frustrating for people that are there and want to express their solidarity among your cause. Because what we see is a very huge confusion. I was talking to another friend of mine who was an expert on foreign policy, and we were saying that if there's one thing that the far right in Latin America and the left in Latin America get wrong together, is the view on Putin. So they are embracing each other. They are very different, but they think Putin in the same way, which is totally contradictory and shouldn't make any sense for anyone who listens. And that helps a little bit to explain why Lula's government has been taking erratic stances on this. Also, not only because of an ideological point of view, because as a global South country, as an emerging nation, we cannot afford ourselves to just declare that we're enemies with very important economic partners. So we are on BRICS, for instance. There's G20 and other very important economic and international forums for discussion. But we see that this issue is very controversial. And not only from this ideological point of view, but also because we have economic ties and interests in trying to build a new and more just international order. So we're talking about the National Council for the United Nations, National Security Council. That's terrifying to know that we still rely on such institutions that are blatantly unfair. Nobody understands how they still keep trying to be relevant in a world that's totally different from when they started. And actually, this is not only a global South view. I'm pretty sure India is also aligned to this, but also if we saw some speeches from global North countries in General Assembly of the UN in September, Finland said expressly that how the National Security Council works shouldn't be something, it's something from the past. We should move forward. We should enhance democracy and a radically democratic revolution in the world if we want to make things better. So yeah, I'd start saying by all this.
Yeah, I would like to,
Thank you. Yes,
if I
please.
can, a very good point made by her. And India is a very strong advocate of reforming the UN and UNSC because it represents the world order which was, decades back after the Second World War world order. And this UNSC or UN, what it gives resolutions, not solution. So, according to the new time, it needs to be reformed, and in a country like Brazil, India, they are the strong, contender to become the UNSC permanent member. So that needs to be done. But who will do it? The biggest question is that who will do it? Where the power lies. That lies with the great power lies with the Western country, and they are not willing to do it. No,
that's why we are discussing it here, because this is the main point, who will do it, and those countries who need it, or those who are okay, fine with the situation, with the current situation. So that's why we are here to discuss, and I see that Mr. Beltrán has joined us. Yes. Hello, Mr. Ambassador. Can you hear us? Mr. Ambassador?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, yes, great, we hear you.
Yeah.
Hi again, and I'm so sorry that we had to interrupt our previous discussion, but it's not our fault, you know. we have to be safe here. So thank you very much for your patience, and remember when we had this preparatory meeting before the discussion, we discussed with you, is it the crisis of the international organizations or not? And after our conversation, we decided to put this word, crisis, in our title. So from your experience, your huge experience, could you tell us what to do with this crisis, how to address the humanitarian issues if nor ICRC, neither UN missions can help, for example, Ukraine to return deported children, to stop torture of POWs or return civilian detainees. And also yesterday we had like a special event and we're discussing what's going on with numerous of other situations like Yazidis genocide in Iraq, for example, or situation in Syria. And all those people are suffering because the international community doesn't have instruments how to help them, how to achieve accountability for perpetrators, and how to solve humanitarian issues. So please, from your point of view, what is the situation, what is the current situation, and what has to be done in future?
Well, thank you very much, Maria. I'm very pleased to be with you, and I hope everybody's safe. Of course, Daniil very kindly talked to me and told me there were some changes in schedule. So don't worry, I just hope that everybody's safe. So thank you, thank Tamara, thank everybody there, and I am very, very pleased to be with you. First of all, so for people over there, they should know I'm a career diplomat. But I'm retired now, so I'm not speaking on behalf of Mexico, of my government. I'm speaking on my own behalf, and also I represent the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations, COMEXI, who is an independent organization that is now asking me to represent whatever is anything we can bring to the table in order to maybe to contribute to the discussion. So based on what I heard prior to my joining you is that new members of the Security Council will not solve the problem, Maria. The problem is huge. It's much more larger than that because we have a veto. We have a veto system in the UN that the permanent members of the UN, of the Security Council, can exercise the veto. Just for instance, just yesterday, the United States vetoed a resolution that was aimed to prepare a ceasefire in Gaza, but the United States vetoed that resolution. So if the big five permanent members of the UN are constantly using the veto power, it creates a huge problem for us. So yes, there's a crisis in the United Nations system, there's a crisis in the multilateral system, but part of the big problem is the veto power. So as the veto power obstructs the decisions in the UN, then what happens is that we have unilateral decisions. I ask you and the colleagues that are present to take one example. If you look at the number of countries that have approved UN General Assembly resolutions that condemns and criticize the invasion of Ukraine, you will find that almost all countries together vote in favor of such resolutions of the UN. But then, when you go to see the sanctions, you will see that more or less 40 countries are in favor of the sanctions. Why? Because those sanctions are taking place outside the framework of the UN. Because of the veto that exists in the Security Council, countries should take a a parallel path to establish those sanctions, and non-affiliated countries do not like this kind of unilateral work, and this is why you have this such enormous difference. Almost all countries in favor of the UN General Assembly resolutions, and then not all of the countries in favor of the sanctions, because those sanctions are unilateral. That's why I'm saying that just adding new members to the Security Council will not solve the problem. The problem is the veto that we have over there. This is one thing. So we have to work, countries will have to work together with Ukraine and others to promote a reform in the United Nations. So this will be addressed, and the United Nations will be more democratic, and decisions are more in appeal to what is the general feeling of the majority of the nations. This is one thing. Secondly, as we discussed previously, the second point is that I think that there's needed to have a strong appeal to humanitarian organizations. So these humanitarian organizations, within two of them within the United Nations and one of them outside of the United Nations, the three of them are located in Geneva. So there should be diplomatic efforts, very strong diplomatic efforts to create programs addressed to help Ukraine to tend their humanitarian problems arising from after the invasion, the displaced people, the refugees, the migrants, and the people that are outside the Ukrainian territory. And three organizations are key to that. One is the International Office of Migrations that takes care of refugees and displaced people. So is it possible to create a program with the International Office for Migration in Geneva in order to help Ukraine and allow countries that would like to help Ukraine to get together around special programs that the IOM, the International Office for Migration, can do? This is one. Secondly, you have also in Geneva the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And also, Ukraine and other countries can try to establish an action plan to address the situation, human rights situation in Ukraine after the war that there's happening right there. So the High Commissioner for Human Rights is also have the competence to address that. But it's not only that Ukraine should go and knock the door of those organizations. I think that a number of countries can get together, Ukraine, non-affiliated countries and others can get together and try to establish programs both in the IOM and the High Commissioner for Refugees. And the same goes for the International Red Cross. It is not the Red Cross itself, it is the countries that should create a program, strongly program with the International Red Cross, so those organizations can try to help the situation. So we have 4 concrete recommendations. First, work together to reform the United Nations. Secondly, go to the International Office for Migration. Third, go to the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And lastly, going to the Red Cross. This is first 4 points I would like to make. But also, I think that Ukraine and a number of friend countries, based on the experience that many countries have, like Mexico and other countries have, can create a special envoy, United Nations special envoy for Ukraine. So this special envoy, this person will be able to help and create all the mechanisms that should see that all other organizations are working to help Ukraine and countries, non-affiliated countries that are helping Ukraine in order to create this framework within the United Nations. So this is the 5th proposal I'm making, create a United Nations special envoy. Now, there are 2 other proposals, and those are within the framework of the Ukraine that many countries like Mexico and others can help because of our experience that we have. One is related to the diaspora. There are some 4.5 or maybe more million of Ukrainians displaced and living abroad. For instance, the case of Mexico, we have 6.5 million Mexicans living in the United States, and we have a consular network of some 50 consulates in the United States in order to create a network and create relationships with our diaspora in order to help them, and maybe some of them trying to return to our countries. This will be the case of Ukraine. So you might like to ask, you guys would like to ask how we can develop such a network. Well, first, you can have the help and assistance of countries of experience, like, I don't know, Mexico, Turkey, and others that have a huge consular networks, Vietnam and others around the world. But also, it is important that within the government of the Ukrainian government, a special program created to the diaspora, so much alike that the Ministry for Unity that President Zelensky announced, that create this relationship with the diaspora, but also the Ukrainians that are living outside could be appointed as part of the consular network and try to help their own country and establish this contact with the diaspora. This is very important, and this can be done, and a lot of help from non-affiliated countries like mine could go to Ukraine to solve this problem. Another issue is to establish a bond. The central bank the Ukrainian central bank could create a bond. So the people living outside, Ukrainians living outside, could buy these bonds. We have some interesting interest rate, and the funds devoted to that will be devoted. On the one hand, they will have a savings account through the purchase of these bonds, but on the other hand, they will be able also to create a fund for the reconstruction of Ukraine, because the reconstruction of Ukraine should start very soon after the war situation is over. But we have to start working on that situation at the central bank and create these bonds. And the other part is that countries that are friends with Ukraine and organizations that are friends of Ukraine should also maybe try to see how they can participate in the reconstruction program of Ukraine. This is very important. So you will find that if these programs are well pitched and worked with non-affiliated and friend countries, there will be a number of organizations and enterprises of the private sector and governments that would like to participate also in the works of the reconstruction. So in the minutes, the first initial minutes that were allocated to me, I think these are the 7 proposals I bring into the table, and I'm ready to keep on working and ready to answer some more questions that you might like to have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for a comprehensive presentation. I think we will have more questions, but now I do have several for all our speakers. It's not straightly about humanitarian issues, but I think it is interconnected with them. Today we have another arrest warrant from the ICC to Netanyahu and Yaku, according to Palestine situation. And also we know that Ukrainians are expecting for Putin to be arrested when he's traveling all over the globe. And before they tried Mongolia and they succeed there, and Putin went to Mongolia successfully coming back. We have more difficult situation with Brazil, but we don't know what can happen some days and if Putin can come to Brazil or not. I want to ask you about these connections, how the unpunishments, impunity of perpetrators influences the humanitarian situations and the issue of prevention, the further crimes. And what can be the role of your countries to strengthen the international accountability system, international mechanisms, including the ICC, to be effective in addressing the international crimes? Maybe we'll start from Marina, because Brazil is very important for us in this regard.
So thank you for the question, Olga. It's a crucial question, and I'll start by, I'm sorry, I'm a philosopher as well, and so I'll start by thinking about the roots of crisis. What is crisis? Crisis is exactly to go back to the origins of the problem, to go deep down. And crises are moments that can reveal the truth, can reveal the way forward. And that's why I think to start, we have to think not only as a very cosmetic reform of the UN, of international mechanisms to enforce international law that's been failing us for ages. And but also we have to think on new ways to do stuff, on new ways to engage civil society. As I was mentioning, I'm very impressed by how Ukrainian civil society is vigilant, is engaged. This is not something common even in well-established democracies. So first of all, I would start by this, and I would say also that, I mean, as we were talking also to the Crimea platform, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So we have to think in cooperation forms, but also in ways that each country can develop a solution and a way to implement their policies. So Brazil is different, similar but also different from India, which is similar but also different from Turkey and Indonesia and other global north countries. First of all, I think we have to talk in 3 steps. I really enjoyed the talk from Mr. Beltrán, which literally did this enumeration of points, bullet points. This is very helpful. So we have to think in short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions. If we are talking about short-term, there are some things that cannot be mistaken anymore. So we know how Putin acts. We know how dangerous he is. We have to isolate him. I'm not saying that Brazil can do the same thing as Germany, but Olaf Scholz, to call Putin in the beginning of the week or last week, this is of such this was a terrible action to be made, and we saw the retaliation of this action afterwards. Obviously, there are some domestic issues going on in Germany right now. The coalition melted down and their personal interests from the government, but this does not justify his action. So we know isolation is a strategy from the global north. I'm not saying that the global south should do the same, but this is a crucial point. Regarding the G20 meeting and how Putin was feeling kind of comfortable to go to Brazil in the beginning of the year. This was actually an agenda we had here in Ukraine when I was in my delegation in January. We were thinking about ways to make him feel uncomfortable, because we knew that Brazil had these institutional erratic positions regarding the war. So there was a lot of pressure from the civil society, so from bottom up, that made him not feel uncomfortable in these hubs that I was telling in the beginning of my talk. Also, another issue that I think can help in this great situation is climate. So we're talking about G20. We know that nature cannot stand any more wars. So, and what Putin has been doing is a war on nature as well, and a war that affects the whole world. And because climate change is something too serious to ignore right now. And so this is another strategy, I'd say, that's short-term, easy to implement, that says and signals that this is not acceptable for us. Medium range and long-term solutions are obviously much more difficult to tackle, but if we don't start now, then when? This is the time. The time of the crisis is the time to start to innovate to be radically democratic, because we know that we don't live in the same world from the 50s, when this whole international law system was implemented. So we're much more complex, much more diverse. We have much more voice as the Global South Alliance, and that's why we have to stick to our strengths and try to make change, and combining our similarities and differences. So what Brazil can do in this context is obviously not the same as the material support that the US and the EU can provide for Ukraine, but obviously it can push for a radical reform, not a cosmetic reform of the UN system and the international implementation mechanisms. And so I'd start by that.
Thank you, thank you. This is very interesting. And Mr. Singh, Ms. Barreto said that Putin should be isolated, but the vision that you presented as an Indian foreign policy, an Indian model, doesn't anticipate him or the Russian authorities to be isolated. Someone has to communicate with the Putin or other Russian authorities according to your view of the negotiations. What do you think about the Western countries' position, about Ms. Barreto's position, that he's the person whom nobody has to talk with?
I'm all for the practical solutions. You just mentioned that there are ICC arrest warrant for, President Putin, and just
Yes.
now we got the news that ICC arrest warrant has come for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister. So my point is that either we should India is not the signatory of ICC, I must clear that. But having said that, my point of view is that even if you go for the arrest of a nation head, so what you will achieve? The practical question I'm asking. That is not going to solve any problem. So only way out is to know each other and to negotiate with the party involved. So what India is doing, India, the way I mentioned, that Indian Prime Minister visited Russia, then he visited Ukraine, and then he also informed America. He talked to US President Biden at that time. So trying to find out a way is the practical way to go ahead. Instead of inciting all those norms and rules and regulations, which is not giving anything. Sir has just said that veto power should be abolished. But why not? It is not possible to include more and more country into the UNSC so that this veto power can be diluted. It cannot be abolished because the kind of constitution or the kind of mandate UN is having, it will not. It is not easy to go away with the veto power. So if we are talking about abolishing the veto power, you must also talk about the inclusion of more and more countries so that if a single country does any kind of veto on a particular subject, so his position can be, democratically, he can be left out. So for example, if we are having 20 countries in USC, 19 voting for one on positive note, one is vetoing, so that veto power can be diluted, and that can be one of the practical solutions. So making world order more inclusive, in my sense, that will give us the desired solution, rather than going after one person or citing some international rule and another country not doing that and then going after that country. So this is my point of view. I'm a very practical person, and I think that there should be a practical approach rather than reiterating the old rules and regulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Beltrán, I see you that you have something to add. I just want to say that Mr. Usov has rejoined us, and ми збиралися почати з того, що
We were going to start with the general overview, but looks like you will summarize the discussion. We've reshuffled your speech, but maybe it's even better. I would like to give the floor now to the ambassador first.
Do you still believe in the power of the international law? According to the latest news and in general?
Well, first of all, I like to say that I appreciate very much the comments made by Marina Barreto and also by my colleague, Mr. Singh. Olga, let me tell you something. I understand where Mr. Singh is coming from, is saying that having more members of the Security Council would dilute the veto power. Unfortunately, this is not the case, because from the legal point, you can have 50 members in the Security Council. And if one country has the power of veto, it doesn't matter the number of countries. This is in the constitution of the UN. So legally, we have to reform the constitution, the charter of the UN, in order to make possible that the veto power is not there anymore. So but I understand the pragmatical point of Mr. Singh. Unfortunately, this is not possible according to the Charter of the United Nations.
Yes, sorry.
Just hold on a second, please. According to what you ask in terms of the International Crime Court issues of arrest, Netanyahu, Putin, and others, let me tell you, the big problem, Ola, is that the most important countries of the world, certainly China, the United States, and many, many others, do not recognize the power of the International Crime Court, criminal court. So this is the problem, really. This is part of when we were discussing, you and me, all these problems. We have to reform, and unfortunately, if we go to what Marina Barreto was saying, we have to think in short, medium, and long term in order to address some problems. So, of course, if Mr. Putin travels to Brazil, and Brazil, of course, recognizes the power of the International Court of Criminal Court, of course, maybe that would be the case. But in many other instances, this is not the case, Olga. So, unfortunately, this is the case. I understand Mr. Singh wants to say something, Olga, but you are handling the time. Thank you. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to say that when I'm saying that to dilute, it means that make the amendment in the Constitution, in the UN Charter. It's not just about that, just keeping the 5 UNSC permanent member and then abolishing the veto. So my point includes both. You abolish the veto, and you at the same time increase the number of UNSC permanent member. Thank you.
Well, if you limit the veto, then you don't need to have more people because you have non-permanent members. We understand that Brazil and India and other countries have tried for years and years to become members of the Security Council, but that's not really the situation. The situation is the veto, because you have 5 permanent members and you have 15 other non-permanent members. So really, I think maybe it's a good thing for a country to become a permanent member of the UN, but that's not the problem we're facing. The problem that we're facing is the veto. It's a major obstacle. Whenever something is against the United States, they put or Israel, then the United States put a veto. China does the same, Russia does the same, the United Kingdom does the same, and France does the same. So that's a huge problem that we have to face. This is the reform we have to do.
Thank you. You see, we have the real discussion now, and this is very interesting, and I'm reluctant to interrupt you. I'm sure we will have this next time, and maybe more deep inside of these problems. But now I want to come back to Dmytro Usov. I'll switch to Ukrainian.
Dmytro, thank you so much for coming back. I hope you had a successful meeting. And now we discuss how non-Western countries can affect the reform of international organizations so that they are effective in overcoming the humanitarian issues. The coordination headquarters have been working a lot dealing with international organizations and their activity in Ukraine, in particular on the matters of the return of civilian detainees, POWs, deported children, and missing persons. What do you think about the work of these international organizations? How do you interact, and what Ukraine is doing to deal with these issues? Thank you, Olga. Yeah, I came back. I even had to run here. And when a general is running in a country at war, the civilians often start panicking. But understanding that it's important for me to be here, I managed to be here, at least at the end of the discussion, to summarize. Talking about international organizations with whom we cooperate, we had high expectations that they would help us. And after full-scale invasion, we contacted almost all the international organizations, and we keep cooperating with them. But if you look at the reports of these international organizations, they only cover what's going on in Ukraine. There's very little information on the aggressor state. But on Ukraine, they provide a lot of information which reflects how Ukraine follows the international humanitarian law. And we are following the IHL requirements. And everything created in Ukraine, like the joint military commissions, which joint medical commissions, which hopefully we wanted to establish them. But the Russian side disagreed to have the joint medical commission and to return the wounded, the people with severe wounds, which have to be selected by the doctors from these joint medical commissions. So, whether we cooperate with these organizations, yes, we cooperate. Whether it's effective, no. All international organizations have shown their ineffectiveness and their inability to operate. I can say that. Today is the day of freedom and dignity in Ukraine. And when we talk about international organizations, we can see these negative statistics. They are not operating in places where there are unrecognized governments or terrorist governments. So the effectiveness of cooperation with these organizations shows that, well, now, for example, 3 employees of the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, are prisoners in Russia. So OSCE is contacting Ukraine to help return the employees of OSCE. We never say no. Even before the full-scale invasion, we always helped with these issues. And Ukraine, and you know this, Ukraine cares about the return of every citizen, wherever they are, whatever is the type of their captivity. And I have some figures, just to show it to you. In these figures, there's no assistance of international organizations shown. Before the full-scale invasion, 2014 till 2022, Ukraine returned 3,459 citizens from captivity. Next, in other countries of the world, if we talk about the return of Ukrainian citizens, in 2020, Ukraine returned from captivity 2 Ukrainian civilians. They returned from Iraq. And I can name a few countries and figures. This is just for you to understand that access to these countries or access to the communication, well, international organizations were not involved in any way. So, October to December 2020, 2 civilians were evacuated from Iraq, from captivity. In 2021, September, August and September. After the agreement with Taliban, 715 civilians were returned from Afghanistan. That includes 313 international citizens who had residence permits in Ukraine and residents of other states. In October to December 2021, with the representatives of the Iraqi Kurdistan, we managed to evacuate 15 civilians from the Syrian Arab Republic. That included 13 Ukrainians and 2 Polish citizens. April 2022, during the negotiations with Sudan representatives, we managed to evacuate dozens of Ukrainians and other nationals. December 2023, March 2024, in the negotiations with Hamas, we managed to evacuate 375 civilians from Gaza. That included 12 citizens of other states beside Ukraine, mostly citizens of Moldova and Palestine. So these statistics I gave and the organizations with whom we were in negotiations on behalf of our main intelligence directorate, we see that, well, we would like international organizations to help us. We would like the Red Cross to actually fulfill their mandate. We would like all the special rapporteurs to note the torture applied against Ukrainian citizens. But mostly we have to rely on our own effort. But there are countries who do help. The countries, the non-West countries. If we talk about Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, India, and Turkey, you see that a very active role in the return of citizens is played by Qatar and UAE. This shows that non-Western countries are trying to be effective players on the global arena, to have some benefits by resolving humanitarian issues. But the resolution of these issues helps us. And we hope that these countries will actually help with international organizations. And we talk about the International Federation of Red Cross and Crescent. And in the Security Council, when we might lack some votes of the countries that still are on the fence or that are influenced by some decisions of Russian Federation. I mean, of course, it's a rhetorical question. And today I can say that here we have representatives of countries that are helping Ukraine, and we really appreciate this. And unfortunately, there are citizens of these countries who are kept as POWs in Ukraine. I can name them. There are citizens who fought on Russian side and then were taken captives from the Islamic Republic of Iran, from the Slovakian Republic, the Republic of Yemen, Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal, the Egypt, Brazil, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Sri Lanka, Cuba. Unfortunately, among the POWs which fought against Ukraine, we have representatives of the above-mentioned countries. And we can state that the Russian Federation is not contacting Ukraine about the exchange or release. So please consider this. Thank you, thank you. It's very interesting. Ms. Barreto is from Brazil, and there are Brazilians as POWs in Ukraine. Maybe it's important for the civil society there. So, Dmytro, what is your key message for the countries that are represented here? Can they provide their impact to help the release Ukrainian citizens? And now we have opinion leaders from these countries. What shall they pass to their societies? Of course they can provide impact. Why? Because international organizations which still exist, they must fulfill their mandate. So the opinion leaders from different countries can influence the representatives of these countries in international organizations, because we really hope international organizations would start working. That includes the grassroots pressure, I would say.
Questions, if somebody has. Yes, I see a hand. Do we have a mic in the hall? No, I will bring. No, somebody is coming. Yeah, see, please.
Thank you very much, Dmytro Usov from Ukraine. When speaking about the problem of the veto, let's be clear. It's not all permanent members with veto who abuse veto power. Since 1991, there has been no one case when UK or France used veto power. Since for the last 10 years, among all vetoed decisions into the United Nations Security Council, 80% of them were vetoed by the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation is the most abusive permanent member of the Security Council, abusing the veto right. By far the first one. China second, US third. US, in 90% of the cases, uses it for defending Israel. Russia uses veto power to defend autocracies and dictatorships around the world, to save North Korea from sanctions, to save Syrian regime from killing its own people, to save other dictators and terrorists around the world, in Africa, wherever. So the real problem is not the veto right per se, but abuse of the veto right and total impunity of the major power abusing the veto right. By the way, having no right whatsoever to sit there, because there is no Russian Federation in the United Nations Charter. I mean, among the members of the United Nations Security Council, there is Soviet Union, not Russian Federation. And we still, I mean, not we, I mean, Ukraine is vocal about this problem, but we still don't see any country saying that they want to reform the United Nations, or even to pretend to ask for be accepted as a new permanent member, to actually to support this notion that Russian Federation should not be kept there, or at least should be forced to stop abusing its veto power. Unless, I mean, how can we change this when countries who are emerging powers, they silent about this problem and not vocal about calling Russian abuse? I mean, without speaking about this, at least, about making declarations, without supporting Ukraine in international organizations, it's not possible. So that's why, basically, the question is how it is possible to reform the United Nations without, I mean, sitting on the fence. Thank you.
As far as I understood, that was more comment than question, but if somebody of our speakers can comment on this. Marina, I see you have some thoughts. Please go ahead.
So thank you for your comment/question. I think you're absolutely right on a lot of stances, but I would disagree on the thing that the problem is not the veto power per se. Because the veto power is a very authoritarian mechanism per se. And the problem is, if you're trying to talk to a lot of people and not all of them are democratic, it's obvious that authoritarian, autocratic nations are going to stand against democratic positions. And obviously this has name, this has surname, this is government, this is Putin and Xi. But there's a lot of different and multiple stands we have to take against the international system of law. And extinguishing veto power is one of them, and I would start saying that this is abusive per se. I would have a lot of other things to say, but I guess we're on the...
Yes, absolutely. This is an endless discussion, so we could proceed. Okay, Mr. Singh, just 30 seconds.
Yes, I have just, I need to add one point that India is also victim of veto power. You know, whenever India tries to put any terrorist from Pakistan origin to put on the list, China vetoes it. So we are also the victim of veto power. But again, I will make my point that veto power, abolishing the veto power is not the only solution. You need to have an inclusive, you know, UNSC, and I don't know what is the problem in including more and more countries. I am emphasizing on this subject because if you have more members, they will come with their own capabilities. Like India is having very strong, you know, influence over, because India is a global economic power nowadays. So it has having its own influence on country like Russia. So if we are, it's not about only getting the UNSC membership, it's also about getting the responsibility. So if you will feel that, okay, in this capacity, I can bring some solution to you, so it will increase the power of that international institutions. As I told you, that this system is working after it was established after the Second World War, and that is going on and going on and going on. So I don't know what is the problem in getting more and more countries involved in the UNSC. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ambassador, are you still with us? And maybe you have some short comment? I think you are muted.
Thank you. First of all, the colleague that was in the polling, I think he has a very great point. And just, I concur with many of his observations. But also, I would like to also just make the point that several countries like Mexico and others, and Brazil and others, have spent more than 2 decades trying to establish a path for reform of the United Nations. The problem is that we have not sufficient traction within the rest of the countries in order to reform the United Nations. So, but we've been working together a lot, and we are not silent. We denounce the abuses of veto power, as the United States yesterday veto a possible ceasefire in Gaza, which I think is yet another problem that we have to address. But also, I would like to mention once again that to have more members of the Security Council, you have to reform the United Nations Charter. It's not just a problem of adding more. Yes, it's maybe a good idea, the more the merrier. You have 50, 60, 20, whatever. But you have to reform the Charter. The problem is not that, I insist. You have to reform the Charter. You need the votes to reform the Charter of the UN. And if you reform the Charter of the UN, just get rid of the veto if you have the power. If not, just to be member of the Security Council just for the sake, hey, I'm a big country, or I'm a very enlightened country, or I'm an African country, I have to be there. It doesn't bring any solution to the problem. It's the veto power which is the main problem, being exercised by China, by Russia, by the United States, by France, of the United Kingdom. That's the huge problem we're having there, and we're witnessing in the Ukrainian problem, as I said, just making a difference, just a comparison between the number of states that approved the UNGA resolutions and the problem in the Security Council. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I see one very brief question. Yeah. Okay. Very brief. We have just 2 minutes left.
А можна ще повернуся до сланців?
With your permission, let me once again come back to the list of those countries that we have prisoners or captives from, currently detained in Ukraine, and also we can, you can have access to some information certifying that Russia is paying a lot of focus on these countries coming from the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, which thus enables them to avoid sanctions imposed by other countries and thus making them closer to certain governments and certain jurisdictions, thus allowing them to recruit and enlist, literally, some citizens from those other countries to fight at war against Ukraine. Yes, this is very helpful observation, very important observation. Definitely should be part of the message to be broadcasted.
About the fundaments of revisited or maybe new international organization, because as we know from history, the United Nations was established upon the ideas of liberal internationalism, universal human rights. But what could be a fundament of a new global organization?
This is not a question for 2 minutes. Absolutely. But if our speakers have one sentence to answer, please try.
Okay, this is a $1 million question, but I'd start by saying democracy. And democracy as a real democracy, not as a staged, fictional democracy that a lot of UN states pretend to be. And just to be really quick, what we're also talking on different discussions, we should be really pragmatic on trying to build this new future. So we're talking about different global south countries here. We should organize working groups to strengthen our positions and to focus on our similarities and differences, what each of us can bring to help Ukraine, to help democracy, because this is one of the biggest challenges of our times. I mean, obviously, neoliberalism, climate crisis, there's a lot of crises to pick up on, but I'd start by saying that. And if I can finish, just a little finish for this. I'm living in Germany right now, so I would like to say a little poem by a German philosopher and poet, which also became a very famous symphony for Beethoven, which is called Ode to Joy. And then in the end of the poem, what she says is something like, if the internet helps. Be embraced, all young millions, with a kiss for all the world, brothers and sisters. Beyond the stars, surely dwells a loving Father. So we're all brothers, we're all sisters. We have to stick together, but knowing what each brother and each sister can provide, which is obviously different from one another. That's it. Thank you again for this amazing event, and I'm eager to talking to you later.
Thank you very much. I think this is amazing finish of our event, and thank you for your. I see, Mr. Beltrán. Okay, if people are not hungry, we can go for maybe 1 minute, not more.
Yeah. Just thank you, Olga. Just very quickly, if I may, very quickly.
Okay.
I think that we cannot lose. I take advantage again of our Brazilian colleague mentioning, is we cannot lose track on these high-level discussions, whether what we're going to do, whether we shall reform or not. We have a number of tasks. My intent today was to bring 7 concrete points that we have to maybe work together, several countries and several organizations with Ukraine in order to take, deal with the concrete aspects that Ukraine is having right now in terms of humanitarian crisis, in terms of reconstruction, in terms of establishing a bright future for all the people of Ukraine. Let's focus on that. And of course, we can discuss, high-level discussions, philosophical discussions, but please try to come up with a concrete plan and something we can gladly put together and work together shoulder to shoulder with our friends of Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Дякую. У нас, в принципі...
Thank you so much. And yes, indeed, we do have the plan. The peace formula declared by President Zelensky provides us with some specific items which can be operated in the actions plans, including those committed to by our friends, particularly the item 4, which is return of Ukrainian citizens from any kind of captivity. And I believe that on behalf of the Ukrainian government and the Coordination Center, we really would be welcoming more active and visible actions manifested and implemented by different countries, including the Middle East, Arabic countries, as well as the rest of the countries of the globe, inviting them to be more productive in such situation. I don't think we would be successful in successfully resolving everything associated with UN restructuring and reorganization as an objective. Nevertheless, we do see the need for future next steps to be constructive and also all-inclusive, to incorporate opinions, perspectives and interests of other countries of the world in order to seek the balance and first and foremost make sure that we prevent any future international crime and armed conflict from happening in our current and future history. With that, I have ultimate pleasure of thanking all of you for attending this panel, and with that, please accept our invitation to join us tomorrow morning early enough to take part in the rest of our discussions. Thank you.